I didn't mean to stare, but there was something about the way she held her coffee cup, steady and deliberate, like she was hiding a tremor beneath control. Maybe it was that quiet precision that drew me in first, before the way her eyes lingered too long on mine. She was my boss's wife. That should have been enough reason to look away. It wasn't. The first time we spoke alone, the office had emptied early. Rain pressed against the glass like it wanted in, soft and persistent. She stood by the window, hair pinned up in that effortless way that made her seem both untouchable and somehow undone. I'd come back from my notebook, that's what I told myself, but when she turned, it felt like I had walked into something I wasn't ready for. "You're still here?" she asked, her voice low, textured, not surprised, not annoyed. Just aware. "I forgot something," I said, though I couldn't remember what. She smiled, not wide, but enough to pull at the corners of her restraint. "We all forget something." Her perfume lingered in the air, faint but magnetic. Sandalwood, maybe? Or something older, warmer. It felt out of place in the sterile light of the office, too human against the cold glow of monitors gone dark. When I moved closer to grab the folder on the desk, our hands brushed. It wasn't much, just a passing contact, but her skin was warm, soft in a way that carried heat long after the touch ended. She didn't pull away immediately. I didn't either. That pause between us, it stretched. Not awkward, not yet. Just heavy. Like both of us were waiting to see who would breathe first. She turned back toward the window. "My husband says I work too much," she said quietly. "But I think it's just that I stay in rooms like this too long." I didn't know what to say to that, whether it was a complaint or a confession. So I said nothing. I just stood beside her, watching her reflection in the glass. Her eyes weren't fixed on the city lights. They were on the faint outline of me standing behind her. She noticed that I noticed. And instead of stepping back, she tilted her head slightly, like testing the air between us. "You remind me," she murmured, "of when everything still felt new. Dangerous, but new." I swallowed, unsure if I was supposed to answer that, or if silence was safer. My voice came out quieter than I meant. "That sounds like a good thing." Her lips curved, the kind of smile that carried 100 second thoughts. "That's exactly why it isn't." The clock on the wall ticked too loudly. Outside, thunder rolled far away, like a warning that hadn't reached us yet. She turned to face me fully then, her eyes sharp but softened by something I couldn't name. I could see the faint line where her lipstick had faded, the crease beside her mouth that came from years of smiling politely, not freely. When she spoke again, it wasn't to fill the silence. It was to break it. "You make me forget I'm supposed to be careful." The words hung there, not flirtation, not apology. Just truth, naked and trembling between us. Before I could reply, before I could even take in the weight of what she'd said, the office door creaked open. A voice called from the hallway, distant but too close. She straightened, smoothing her blouse like nothing had happened, eyes flicking to mine for 1 second, a silent "don't move, don't speak." Then she smiled again, the kind people wear when they've just hidden something precious. And just like that, the moment ended, but not completely. Some things, once started, don't stop just because the door opens. The next time we spoke, it wasn't supposed to mean anything. It was a Tuesday, the kind of day that stretches too long, where everything feels gray around the edges. She'd come by the office for something small, a signed paper, a forgotten key. My boss was out at a conference. When I saw her standing in the doorway, sunlight falling across her face, it felt like the rain from that first night had followed me anyway, quiet, waiting. "You're here again," she said. Not a question. "So are you," I answered before realizing how that sounded. Her smile came slower this time, almost tired. "I'm always somewhere I shouldn't linger." There was a story in that, in the way her voice caught on linger. I didn't ask, but she must have seen the question in my eyes because she kept talking, almost to herself. "My husband and I met young," she said, fingertips tracing the edge of the desk. "We built something. Then one day, it stopped feeling like ours. Just something that needed to stay standing. I didn't know whether to look at her or away. She wasn't asking for pity. She was explaining why her eyes sometimes looked far away, even in small rooms. "I'm sorry," I said quietly. "Don't be." She gave a soft shrug. "Everyone gets lonely in different ways. Mine just hides well." For a moment, she stared at the window again, and I thought that would be it, another almost conversation. But then she stepped closer. Close enough that I could smell the faint trace of her perfume again, warmer now, like it had learned my skin. "You shouldn't look at me the way you do," she said. I tried to laugh, but it came out uneven. "How do I look at you?" Her eyes lifted to meet mine. "Like you're not supposed to." The words struck somewhere low in my chest. She didn't step back. Neither did I. "I try not to," I said, honest in a way that felt reckless. She smiled faintly, not amused, but understood. "You're too young to have learned restraint yet." I wanted to tell her she was wrong, that I knew restraint all too well. The kind that burns slow, like a match you can't blow out. But she was close enough now that speaking would have broken something fragile. Her hand brushed against my arm, accidental at first, then not. Her fingers lingered, tracing a line that wasn't supposed to be there. I could feel her breath, steady but uneven. She was composed, but her thumb trembled slightly as it rested against my sleeve. Neither of us spoke. The silence was too loud. Then she drew back, as if waking from a dream. "You should go," she said softly, "before someone sees you here." But she didn't move aside. I nodded, stepped past her, and in that narrow space between us, our shoulders touched. Just a second, but it felt like something more permanent had been exchanged. I reached the door, turned the handle. Behind me, she exhaled, a sound so quiet it almost wasn't there. "Next time," she whispered, "don't try so hard to look away." And for the first time, I realized there was going to be a next time. I told myself I wouldn't see her again, that I'd learned my lesson. But lessons have a way of blurring when her voice finds its way through the door. It was Friday afternoon. The office was busier than usual, everyone restless before the weekend. I was finishing reports when she appeared, not in person, at first, but in a message on my desk phone. "Can you bring the files to the house? He'll be late." Just business. On paper, anyway. By the time I reached the driveway, dusk was settling. The house was too large for the kind of silence it held. She opened the door herself, casual clothes this time, hair loose, barefoot. I tried not to stare, failed instantly. "You didn't have to come this late," she said, but her tone didn't sound like protest. "I didn't mind," I replied, and the words carried more weight than they should have. We stood there for a breath too long before she stepped aside. "Come in." The air smelled faintly of jasmine and rain, the kind of scent that makes memory feel physical. She motioned to the dining table. "Just leave them there." I set the folder down, aware of her watching me. The sound of paper against wood was too loud. "Do you ever wonder," she asked suddenly, "how people end up somewhere they shouldn't be?" Her question hung in the air like a dare. I turned toward her. "All the time." For a moment neither of us moved. Then she took a slow step forward, and another. The distance between us shrank until I could feel the warmth of her body before she even touched me. "You shouldn't look at me like that," she whispered again. "You told me not to try so hard to look away." That made her laugh softly, a sound that cracked the tension and deepened it all at once. She reached for the folder, her hand brushing mine. The contact lingered. The air shifted. Time felt fragile. Then, the sharp trill of a phone vibrating on the table. Her phone. We both froze. Her eyes flicked to the screen. "Husband." She didn't answer. She just watched it ring, the sound slicing through the moment like a warning. When it stopped, silence filled the room again, heavier now, charged. "I should," she started. "Yeah," I said quickly. "Of course." But neither of us moved. Her breath caught, barely audible. I could see the conflict in her, the part that wanted to step back, and the part that didn't know how. When she finally spoke, her voice was low, unsteady. "You make this too easy." "I don't think any of this is easy," I said. Something flickered in her eyes, recognition, maybe, or surrender. She reached up as if to fix her hair, but her fingers grazed my cheek instead. A soft, accidental touch that stayed too long to be either. I didn't breathe. Her hand slipped away, leaving warmth behind. She took a half step back, but her eyes didn't follow. Outside, headlights swept briefly across the window, a car pulling into the driveway. Her expression changed instantly, a flicker of fear and composure blending in one motion. She whispered fast, urgent, "Go." Out the back. I hesitated, but she placed her hand against my chest, not to pull me closer, not to push me away, just to feel the heartbeat she'd caused. Then she let go. I slipped out the side door into the night, breathless, pulse still echoing against where her hand had been. And for the first time, I realized that wanting her wasn't the most dangerous part. Being wanted back was. Days passed like slow thunder, quiet, charged, always ready to break. I avoided her for a week. Told myself distance would dull whatever had started between us. But it didn't fade. It sharpened. Every email, every overheard mention of her name, it was like being reminded of something I wasn't allowed to want. When I finally saw her again, it wasn't planned. A company dinner, dimly lit, too formal to breathe. She arrived late, walking in with that practiced calm that made every head turn. Her husband greeted clients with laughter that didn't reach his eyes. She caught mine across the table and held it, not long, not obvious, but enough. I left early. Couldn't sit through another speech. She followed. The hallway outside the ballroom was empty, carpeted in silence. I heard her footsteps before I turned. "You shouldn't have walked out," she said. "I couldn't stay." "Because of me?" "Yes." She exhaled, the kind of sound that comes from someone trying to steady herself. "You think I don't feel it too?" I didn't answer. I didn't have to. The air between us said everything. She stepped closer until the scent of her perfume, jasmine and rain again, became the air I was breathing. "I can't do this," she whispered. "Then why are you here?" Her eyes lifted to mine, bright and wet around the edges. "Because I wanted to see if I could stop." I swallowed hard, feeling my pulse in every word. "And?" Her hand rose, hesitant, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear. My fingers moved before thought could stop them, tracing the same strand, my knuckles brushing her cheek. She didn't move away. "Don't," she said softly, though her voice broke halfway through. "I'm not touching you," I murmured. "Then why does it feel like you are?" Her words trembled, not from fear, but from everything we hadn't said. I could see it in the tightness of her shoulders, the way her breath came shallow, the way her gaze kept falling to my mouth. "I think about you," I confessed quietly. "More than I should." Her lips parted, not to speak, just to breathe. "You shouldn't tell me that." "I know." For a heartbeat, either of us moved. Then she leaned in, barely, her hand finding my tie, fingertips ghosting against the fabric. "Do you even understand what this would mean?" I nodded once. "Yes." "And you'd still, yes." That single word hung there like a spark between two wires. Her hand slipped higher, resting at the base of my throat. Her thumb pressed lightly, feeling the rush beneath my skin. "You make me forget I'm supposed to be careful," she said again, but this time, it wasn't a warning. It was surrender. Her face was inches from mine, breath mingling, the world narrowing to warmth and heartbeat and silence. Then, a sound. A door opening at the end of the hallway. Voices approaching. We froze, eyes locked, every muscle holding its breath. She whispered, so close I felt it more than heard it. "Not yet." And she stepped back, just before everything could break. The studio was smaller than I expected, quiet, tucked away on the second floor of an old building above a flower shop. The kind of place that felt borrowed from time. When I walked in, she was already there. The room smelled faintly of paint and cedar, sunlight pooling across half-finished canvases. She wasn't dressed like the woman from the office or the dinners, no jewelry, no practiced poise. Just her. For a moment neither of us spoke. "You came," she said softly. "You asked?" She nodded once, eyes distant. "I wasn't sure if I meant it when I did." I stepped closer, slow enough to give her room to change her mind. She didn't move. The air between us felt fragile, stretched too thin to breathe. "I shouldn't have asked you here," she murmured. "It makes everything too real." "It already is real," I said. That made her look up. Something flickered in her expression, fear, want, both. "You don't understand what I'd be risking." "I do," I said quietly. "I'm here anyway." The silence that followed wasn't empty. It pulsed, alive with everything unsaid. I could hear her breathing, steady at first, then uneven. She turned slightly, brushing her fingers against the canvas as though it could steady her, leaving faint smudges of color on her skin. I took one more step. Close enough now that I could see the fine tremor in her hands. "Why do you keep coming back?" she whispered. "Because every time I try to stop thinking about you, I fail." Her eyes closed, a soft sound escaping her lips, half sigh, half surrender. "You shouldn't say things like that." "Then tell me to leave." She opened her eyes slowly, meeting mine. "I can't." The world narrowed, just the sound of rain starting outside, the faint hum of traffic below, and the sharp, quick rhythm of two hearts beating out of sync. She moved first, or maybe we both did. Her hand came up to my face, trembling but sure, fingertips tracing the line of my jaw. I felt her breathe before her words. "This isn't supposed to happen." "But it's happening," I said. Her palm lingered there, warm and certain, until she whispered, "If I don't stop now, I won't." I caught her wrist gently, holding it there, feeling her pulse race beneath my thumb. "Then don't." For a heartbeat, everything froze, our foreheads almost touching, breath mixing, the space between us collapsing into nothing. And then, she stepped back. Just one step, but it felt like the world tilted. Her voice was barely there. "If I cross that line, I lose myself. And I think you'd hate me for it." "I could never," I said. "You would," she whispered. "Because I would hate me first." She smiled then, soft, sad, complete. "You made me remember I'm still alive. That's enough." Her hand brushed my chest, once, gentle as goodbye. Then she turned, facing the rain-streaked window, her reflection the only thing between us now. And in that stillness, I understood, this wasn't rejection. It was mercy. When I left, she didn't look back. She didn't need to. Some truths don't end in touch. They end in knowing. It had been weeks since that day in the studio. Weeks since the rain, since her voice breaking in the space between what almost happened and what didn't. I thought I'd moved on, buried it under work, routine, polite smiles that meant nothing. But every now and then, I'd catch something familiar, the scent of jasmine, a reflection in a window, the sound of a woman's laugh that wasn't hers. And for a heartbeat I'd be right back there, the warmth of her hand, the quiet between us that said everything words couldn't. Then one afternoon, she appeared again. No warning, no message. Just there, standing outside the building, sunlight catching in her hair. I froze at the sight of her. She looked different, lighter somehow, like she'd finally let herself breathe. "Hi," I said. My voice came out quieter than I meant. "Hi," she echoed, smiling softly. "I wasn't sure if I should come." "I'm glad you did." We walked without saying much, down the street where the wind carried the smell of fresh bread and car exhaust. It felt oddly normal, the two of us side by side, not as secrets or almosts, but as people trying to find steady ground again. "I've been painting," she said eventually. "Not for anyone. Just because I wanted to." "That's good," I said. "You used to talk about it like something you missed." She looked at me then, really looked, the kind of gaze that still managed to stop my pulse. "I missed a lot of things," she said quietly. "But I don't regret any of it. Not even this." The honesty in her voice hit deeper than I expected. Me neither. We stopped at a small park bench, the same one where I used to eat lunch between shifts. She sat first, smoothing her skirt, then patted the space beside her. I sat. Close enough to feel her warmth, not close enough to cross old lines. For a long time, neither of us spoke. The city moved around us, children shouting, dogs barking, life carrying on, and somehow, that made it easier to breathe. Finally, she reached for my hand. Her fingers slipped into mine, tentative at first, then sure. You know, she said softly, when I told you I'd lose myself. I think I just didn't know who that was anymore. And now? I asked. Now I do. She turned to me, her smile small but real. You helped me remember. Her thumb brushed over my knuckles, slow and steady. No rush, no fear. Just warmth. I leaned slightly toward her, enough that our shoulders touched. She didn't move away. For the first time, it didn't feel wrong, it felt like peace. She let out a quiet laugh. We really did make a mess of things, didn't we? Yeah, I said, smiling back. But the good kind. We sat like that, the late light softening around us, the world shrinking to one steady heartbeat between two people who had finally stopped running from it. And when she rested her head against my shoulder, just for a moment, it felt like the truest ending we could have had.